Hello everyone. Are you wanting to scale up your impact and really create systems change? So you're considering partnering with the government to do it. Perhaps you're wondering what you need to consider and how to work together, and even whether it's right for your NGO. Let's find out about the complexities of creating partnerships with statutory organisations so that if we choose to take that path, we can try to get it right from the start. Hello everyone, I'm Louise from the Social Strategy Cafe and it's lovely to have you here. This channel provides tools and tips for strategically developing your non-profit. So it doesn't matter whether you work for an NGO, whether you run a social enterprise, or you're a trustee of a charity. We all want to increase the impact of our organisations, and working with the government is one path to achieving that goal. But is it right for our organisation? What do we need to be aware of, and how can we be better collaborators to create systems change? Grab yourself a cuppa and let's take a look. Scaling up the impact of your organisation is what many of us want to achieve, but is it the right and most effective move to partner with your government in order to achieve it? Collaborating with any other organisation is always going to raise issues, as you have to contend with competing priorities and differing organisational cultures. However, partnership working with large government institutions when you are a nimble and passionately driven NGO can be much more of a challenge and highly complex to manage. According to recent research undertaken by Just Systems, there can be 7 hurdles to effective NGO and government collaboration, which include NGOs and governments don't understand each other. Often there is division and lack of understanding by NGOs about how to engage government at different levels, and poor understanding about what constrains and motivates politicians and civil servants. Negative perceptions around government functioning can be common, such as their high levels of bureaucracy, corruption, and even authoritarianism. Many NGOs are reluctant to get involved with politics. Although political change is the biggest driver of systems change, NGOs can miss opportunities to widen their impact and shift political decisions by not engaging with or not understanding enough about the levers of change, how to address government priorities and political constraints. The lack of meaningful inclusion of marginalised or disadvantaged groups by government. Although government recognises the value of inclusion, often this is not addressed through tackling the underlying drivers of racial, gender and class-based discrimination, and paying lip service to considering participation, agency and leadership. Lack of clarity and focus by government and NGOs on creating meaningful and measurable changes in people's lives. Government staff are not always rewarded for problem solving and achieving significant outcomes, and there can be a lack of accountability across both government and NGO organisations for concrete improvements in people's lives. Having too many priorities can mean that nothing is done well instead of focusing on just a few. Priority is not given to strengthening state capacity and widely using best practices. Best practice is often delivered by individuals in government organisations rather than more widely across systems. There is limited consideration given to changing practice and norms at scale and being in alignment, which could lead to thinking bureaucracies. The complexity of today's pressing challenges requires focus on people, relationships and networks in imaginative and non-hierarchical ways. Logistical approaches to solving problems are not enough for today's complex challenges. Existing norms, systems and relationships do not lend themselves to the more collaborative and systemic approaches that we need, and these require continuous improving and updating, which is so difficult to achieve across large and multiple institutions. So instead, we need to collaborate in new ways across government, sectors and organisations. The nature of funding and reporting cycles can undermine systems change. Quick and visible wins are prioritised by funders and politicians, and at the same time, NGOs try to defend their interventions from the system to protect resources and reputations. This limits the scope and ability of NGOs and their partners to create transformative systems change. So these hurdles highlight how complicated it is to undertake any partnership with government institutions. The Philanthropy Roundtable actually cautions against too much government collaboration, as they claim it leads to an over-reliance on government funding, which threatens a non-profit's independence. They claim that there's a real risk of non-profits acting as a bureaucratic arm of the state, rather than an independent and community-focused organisation. From their research, they found that non-profits that were heavily reliant on government funding had shifted away from being innovative and responsive to local concerns, as they had to prioritise bureaucratic compliance. So the Philanthropy Roundtable recommends reducing any dependency on government funds to ensure your NGO can remain dynamic, community-driven and able to challenge the status quo. However, if you still think you really want to collaborate with government to create a wider change, how should you go about creating the cultural attitude shift in your NGO for a government partnership? Well, the Stanford Social Innovation Review recommends 5 different mindsets to prioritise when preparing for this new venture. Number 1, place public systems and government at the centre. So instead of putting your NGO at the centre, you need to put the system that needs to change at the centre. This will help to reorientate how your NGO engages with the government. Then you need to find out what the government's agenda is and make it more of a fact-finding mission to really understand where they are coming from. Focus on learning exactly what makes your government work, what motivates government officials, what their challenges are, and how their institutions can change. If you want examples of how this has worked, Harambee, a social enterprise in South Africa, shifted from directly training young people for employment to facilitating a national platform that draws upon government and hundreds of NGO partners. And Save Life Foundation, an Indian non-profit, took this approach to partner with government, which enabled them to deliver an unprecedented reduction in road crash fatalities on the stretches of road where it had been deployed. The second different mindset change that the Stanford Social Innovation Review recommends is to co-create with government. You really need to co-create a new programme with the government rather than expecting them to line up behind an idea that's been created by an NGO. Evidence collated from the International Growth Centre research indicates that co-designing a programme together with government right from the start is much more likely to succeed. This is because it allows more diverse perspectives to be incorporated. It enables a deeper appreciation of the problem, and it builds trust. They suggest a mindset adjustment. So think about approaching government as doers and thinkers at scale, and that they are capable of innovation. Make sure that you are open to hearing their ideas and their solutions. IREX in Jordan is an example of co-creation where government works with other stakeholders to improve public teacher education programs and to improve learning outcomes for early grade students. And Samagra in India worked with political and public leaders to diagnose and address problems that undermine people's quality of life. The third different mindset change that the Stanford Social Innovation Review recommends is to build support and trust, including frontline workers. So according to the India Development Review, because government is made up of people, many of whom are capable and want to do the best for their communities, we need to ask the question, how do we scale the trust and conditions that make solutions possible? Research from Just Systems confirms that trusted relationships and how people participate make the key difference to whether a programme will work at scale. Dan Honig's research confirms that empowering and trusting public servants is what leads to enhanced government performance and improved public welfare. This trust needs to go alongside the empowerment of other marginalised people to exercise greater influence of change within the public system. One example is Last Mile Health's work to support community health workers advocate for salaries and support to improve outcomes across Africa. And the Centre for Effective Governance of Indian States' partnership with government to design and implement effective governance reforms. The fourth mindset change that the Stanford Social Innovation Review recommends is to build a broad coalition. It is impossible to create deep systemic changes on your own, so you need to establish a coalition of effective and influential stakeholders to build sufficient support and sustain change. This means that you need to understand how power is distributed in government, society, and other institutions. Recognizing who the elites are in your society is important, and then understanding how you can help them appreciate that their long-term interests will be better served by advancing social progress with you will help systems change happen much more quickly. Examples of this include Alifa Labantwana in South Africa, which is an early childhood development programme, and the Open Government Partnership, which is an organisation of reformers inside and outside of government across 77 countries, which is working to transform how government serves its citizens. And the fifth different mindset change that the Stanford Social Innovation Review recommends is to be sensitive to political considerations. Political considerations are the biggest influence to systems change, and there are specific moments when the possibilities of change are the most available, such as an election, a crisis, or a leader's desire for a legacy. Landesa is a charity that works to secure land rights for millions of people around the world. They have had a lot of success with leveraging political windows of opportunity, such as in China in the 1980s and 1990s, and some former Soviet republics in the 1990s and 2000s, and in Myanmar in the 2010s. The Chandler Institute of Governance, which is a non-profit based in Singapore, has been equally successful in strengthening civil society and improving government effectiveness with newly elected leaders in Zambia and Malawi. So, naturally, working in partnership with government is not right for everyone, and there is a value in purely offering direct service delivery, providing research and independent voices who understand local need or lobby for change from the outside. However, the challenges of requiring ever-increasing funding to keep reaching more people may prevent you from achieving what you really want your NGO to achieve, particularly in this era of reductions in global aid. If your vision is really to scale up your impact and create systems change, the most effective way to do it is to work with government to make the systems work better for all people. So bearing in mind all the issues I've mentioned, I just wanted to add 8 key areas that you should work through when setting up any new partnership agreement. The first is about making sure all partners are in strategic alignment. Does your NGO and your potential partners have shared goals? These could be about the aims of the project, about social impact or sustainability. Also clarify whether the government organisation shares your long-term vision and is not just seeing the partnership as a short-term opportunity. Make sure that you're clear what both organisations or all the partners are getting from the partnership. This could be funding, expertise, social impact, publicity, and so on. The second point is about values and ethics. Undertake due diligence on your potential partners in areas such as finances, social responsibility, human rights, environmental concerns, and governance, so you really understand who they are and whether you really think you can and you should work together. Consider whether there is any potential risk to your NGO by working with this organisation. Are they in any way controversial, which could impact on your other funding or how you're regarded by your supporters? Set out what your non-negotiables are. If you haven't already, you may want to draft an ethical fundraising and gifts policy, which clarifies which organisations you are willing to work with and perhaps receive money from. So your policy may prevent you from partnering with or receiving funding from an organisation that generates its income from gambling, the arms trade, or alcohol, for example. Now think about legal and governance issues. Make sure you have clear agreements drafted, which could be in the form of a contract or memorandums of understanding, which clearly define what each partner is responsible for, and any timescales that are necessary for your project to achieve its goals. Check with a legally trained person that your partnership complies with laws and regulations. Make sure that you can maintain open reporting and financial accountability, which will be necessary for legal accountability, impact assessment, donors, and your beneficiaries. Now, what are the financial arrangements? Confirm what the funding model is that you're both working to. Who's paying for what and in what form, such as grants or loans? And does anyone receive something in kind? What financial controls will you both use, and will they be compatible with your existing processes? Make sure you have budgeting and auditing processes clarified. Will this potential partner be offering core funding? And if so, are you reliant on this in order for your organisation to survive? Because if so, it's a high-risk strategy. The next area is around roles and power distribution. How are decisions going to be made and how will conflicts be resolved? Make sure you're being realistic about what your NGO can deliver. Will it be within your capacity, and do you have the resources? And how will your NGO's contribution be recognised, particularly if you're working with large or high-profile organisations? And now, have you decided how you will measure your impact together? How will you co-design your project and get your beneficiaries involved in the process? Make sure you define your metrics. What are your outputs and what outcomes are you hoping to achieve? And what tools are you going to use to measure them? And will all the staff be trained in the processes together? Will you have a feedback loop process to continuously improve your project? And how will you incorporate beneficiaries' views into this? Clarify how you can demonstrate your NGO's separate impact within the project and whether there will be a final report written about your joint impact and how you'll go about this together. The seventh area is relationship management. Set down how you will communicate, how many meetings there will be, and what the purpose of each of them are. Discuss any cultural issues in advance to make sure that everyone understands how to approach issues sensitively, particularly if you're collaborating across cultural and national boundaries. Define your exit plan to the partnership and spell out how things will come to an end financially, operationally, and reputationally. And finally, risk management. Clarify what will happen if there are operational risks to your project, such as delays in funding, delays to getting the project started, and if there are any bureaucratic hurdles to your project which may prevent you from achieving your deadlines. By discussing all the potential issues in advance, you are more likely to protect your NGO from any potential risk. Hopefully you will have done some due diligence on your potential partner and considered how you will publicise your joint project. but make sure you have discussed how you will approach any reputational issue before anything occurs in case of any such controversy. Try to ensure you have the capacity to manage the partnership project so that it doesn't lead to mission drift in order to meet your partner's expectations or the project's outcomes. Anyway, now I hope I've given you some tools and discussion points to move your government partnership forward, if that's what feels right for your NGO. Good luck. And if you have an idea for a video you'd like to see, please let me know in the comments below. Have a great week, everyone.